Well, we are right in the middle of talking about sex and marriage. Whew, what a hot subject. My wife and I were just talking, why is it that we have have treated sexuality like it's bad? And you know what? Sexuality is a gift from God, but it's a gift that's extremely powerful. There's nothing else that will take two beings and make them one. Sexuality, it's extremely powerful, but yet it's so misused. And that's what the Apostle Paul is talking about here in the 7th chapter of the book of First Corinthians. And we're in the 4th verse today, and we're going to go back. We talked about it just a little bit yesterday, and then I completely ran out of time. But the 4th verse says, a wife does not have authority over her own body, nor does the husband. But the husband does. And likewise also the husband does not have authority over his own body, but the wife does. Now it's talking about sexuality. It's not talking about a man taking and beating his wife and telling her to submit. That is not what he's talking about. He's talking about sexuality in marriage. Now, the word authority it comes from the root word of this word authority is exousia. But this word means that a married person does not have a separate power or liberty over their body. In other words, a wife can't say, this is my body, don't touch me. And a husband can't say, this is my body, don't you touch my body. That's what the Apostle Paul is talking about. He started out this whole thing by answering a question. Is it good for a man to touch? And the word touch means to adhere to or to take possession of, or to touch in a way of arousing. The Apostle Paul here is telling us that a wife doesn't have authority over her body. In other words, he's saying that a wife can't say to her husband, don't touch me. And a husband can't say to a wife, don't touch me. Now, verse number 5, stop depriving one another. You know, when a person gets involved in immorality, when a person gets involved in pornography, we know what he's doing? He's depriving his spouse or her spouse. And they tell me that women are just as involved in pornography as men are. What are they doing? They're depriving their spouse of that affection, of that time, those intentions, those sexual intentions. And so Paul says, stop depriving one another. In other words, touch each other. Husband and wife, you need to touch each other in a sexual way. Stop depriving one another, except by an agreement of time. What's he talking about? He said the only exception is that when you agree together for a time, not forever, but for a time. And then he goes on and he clarifies this time so that you may devote yourselves to prayer. In other words, when you have a prayer time, don't be touching each other. Not holding hands. My wife and I many times will hold hands and pray. We're touching each other, but not touching each other in a sexual way. So he's saying, you know what? When you're praying, don't be touching each other in a sexual way. And then he goes on, he says that's a time of an agreement. And then he says, come together again so that Satan will not tempt you because of your lack of self-control. And again, we go back to this premise that the Apostle Paul is saying that marriage is something that you need to control your sexual appetites. Sexual appetites inside of a godly marriage are wonderful. They're given to us by God. Outside of marriage, no. Extramarital, no. In marriage, yes. They are given to us by God. So he says, and come together again, so that Satan will not tempt you because of your lack of self-control. What's he saying? He's saying that husbands and wives, you need to be fulfilling the desires of each other in marriage. Verse number 6. But I say this by way of concession and not command. Now, what's he saying? Some people would say, well, you know what? He said that in ways of concession. It's not a command. Well, let me tell you, it's something that was inspired by the Holy Spirit. Now, what does he mean by concession? Paul is the word concession means something that's agreeable or something with permission. Now, let's take this in context again. The Apostle Paul is responding to a question that the Corinthians asked. Is it good for a man to touch a woman? The first verse of chapter 7. What's Paul saying? He's saying, you know what? You gave me permission to address this, and I'm addressing it. I'm addressing it under the inspiration of the Holy Spirit. So you can't take this phrase and say, yeah, we'll just throw out that part of chapter 7. No. Paul is saying, you're giving me permission to address this question. So I am addressing it. And again, he's not just expressing his opinion. I believe he is expressing the opinion of the Holy Spirit himself. But then he goes on and he says it's not a command. Paul had commanded them in regards to an immoral man. He is no longer commanding, but he's telling him, this is my godly opinion. You asked for my opinion, and this is my godly opinion of sex inside marriage. Now, the Apostle Paul goes on. Yet I wish that all men were even as myself. Now, what does Paul mean by that? Paul is single at this time. We don't know if Paul is single because his wife divorced him, that his wife left him. That's very possible. But we do believe that the Apostle Paul was single at this time. Maybe his wife died in persecution. Anyway, my time has run up for this week. We're going to pick up here in verse number 7 on Monday, so make sure you watch. Thank you for watching. God bless you. Have a great weekend. See you next week.